Well, it's Friday. It doesn't feel like one. I've had a crazy busy week. Biggest thing was the huge amount of time I had to spend restoring this gentleman's watch. I'm still amazed how deeply down in the hole this thing was, and that I was able to bring it back. It's just, I'm very proud of it. Not to show off someone else's watch, but I am proud of that watch. Isn't that pretty? Look at that thing. I can't believe I was able to suss it out and get it figured out. I mean, some of the problems that this thing had, I don't know how anybody, I'm sure somebody else must have figured it out, but I sure didn't. Wait, I did figure it out. I'm just confused. It's been a long week. It's been a very long week. But I did want to talk about that watch, or at least showed off, because a number of questions were put up regarding this. Wrist check.
Okay, wrist check time. I'm wearing, for me, an unusual watch on an incorrect bracelet. This is a 7A38 7270. It is from September 1987. This one I got, gosh, probably 8 or 9 years ago. And it was just beaten to death. And then I just like the look of it. It's a very, very clean design. Very sort of stripped down, but very legible. I like the bar type bracelet, so I put that on there. They're cool. Oh boy, Sebastian's angry. Anyway, it's super cool. I'm trying to go through and wear watches I don't wear a whole lot, and this is one of them. It's so beautifully made. I don't know when I'll wear it again, but there it is, all of its glory. Come on. Right on. Okay. Ooh, look, and someone just walked in to do someone else's wrist check.
It needs to be cleaned off because I bonked on the wall. But that is the first watch that Spencer ever made for me.
Yep, look at that, an automatic Seamaster. That's a beautiful watch. I think the movement in that is it's a 500 series Omega movement on the original Grains of Rice bracelet. It's so sleek and cool.
I feel like a QVC model.
Well, cool. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you're wearing it.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, let's do this. Garrett Jansen, and again, we are talking about, these are questions about this 6139 6009 notch resist belonged to the original, it belonged to the current owner's father. He sent it in for service in the early 1970s, and the service dial they put in was a true Pogue dial. So anyway, but it had tons and tons of, it had lived a hard, wet, chemically life, and it took a lot, and it had some less than stellar repair work done back in the 70s, and so I had to deal with that too. It was just a lot of work. It's a challenge. Amazing how much work you put into this. Also amazing that the service dial is a true Pogue dial. Wild watch all around. Absolutely. One of the things, though, I like about watches like this, what are you laughing at? What?
Nothing.
Is it a Stardew thing?
Yes.
Oh, my Sabrina, rather than, putting her nose to the grindstone to help me with this video, not that I'm joking, she's playing Stardew. Watches like this that went through service back in the day and got these sort of interesting mods, I consider them to be completely valid as they are now. So it's watches like this have real personality and uniqueness, and I like them a lot as a result. A number of my long-term keepers are watches like that one that had interesting servicing choices made a long time ago. I just think it's unusual. But it had gotten tons of water inside, and it had rusted, and the crystal had gotten smashed, and the dial surface was badly damaged, and the loom was badly damaged, and the guy who repaired it, he jacked up the chronograph wheel, but I was able to save it. I was able to save a lot of it. Just all I had to do was put in lots and lots and lots and lots of labor hours that I'm not going to be able to bill for. But the watch is running, and that's what's important. Again, about this watch, Kyle Parsons, amazing video as always. I love that you have a constant stream of thoughts. It provides little anecdotes you've picked up from experience that are usually omitted by others. Well, I'm glad you enjoy me
See,
talking.
that's the good thing about not editing, unlike some people complaining, you don't edit your videos. You know what? Who cares? Sorry.
Oh,
It's
no,
a pet peeve.
Oh no, that's okay. It's an ADHD thing. Anything, because there isn't, when you have ADHD is a physical difference in the brain, and it affects. It's literally the brain. Certain brain structures are different, and what it primarily does is it means that one's executive functions are dysfunctional, misfunctional, and that there are a bunch of things that can happen as a result. One of them is that you don't have a lot of filters, and what a thought comes into your head comes right out of your mouth. So hopefully the anecdotes are useful. If you folks out there don't like my anecdotes, I don't know, once you can turn the sound off and then put on, say, Sabrina's favorite band, Lord Huron, and then listen to them. Why not? Next comment, again on this video, from Island Timekeeper. And this was something that I said on that video. I've been trying to break myself of a bad habit. And one of the habits is humming without thinking. And so I'm trying to stop myself. And I said something like that. Dude, you're right. That's enough humming. The humming does not help. The watch work is great. The humming, not so much. It's one of those things, man. I'm working on it, but you know, it's just a constant. There's always music in my head. The music is never not running in my head. And I mean that literally. There's always music in my head. And it might again be an ADHD thing. So anyway, I'm working on the humming. I'm working on it. But again, if you can't take it, you could go back to Lord Huron's suggestion. Okay, so here we go. The next comment. This is about the H558 7010 Arnie Fieldmaster that I restored earlier this week. No, actually at the end of last week. 24/7 ADT. Since these movements are mass-produced and are complex, I wonder how the factory assembles them. Is it accomplished by machine or robot? Spencer, you very clearly show how complicated these movements are, yet they are cranked out in large numbers. Fascinating. I don't have an answer for you, and frankly, I wish I knew. I mean, Seiko started pushing themselves as basically a robot-powered watch company starting around 1970. They had an ad campaign that was Seiko, the Automation Age Watch. And so the idea being, and the tagline was, pay for the watch, not the labor used to create it, or something like that. I have no idea how they managed to figure that out in 1970. I don't know how their machines worked. I don't know if they were electrical or mechanical or hydraulic or powered by magic. I have absolutely no idea. But it is really cool. I mean, and they're talking, I don't know how deep it goes. I should know, but I don't. But it is incredibly cool. I have no idea how a robot, I mean, they assemble all kinds of things with robots, but it's like back then, I mean, because yeah, that movement is like really, they're delicate in the sense that they're like a house of cards. You have the house of cards until you screw it together, and then that holds everything the way it's supposed to be. But if something it's lightly built with a lot of spring stuff going on, and it's like, I have no idea how a robot could have put it together. Literally, no idea. Maybe somebody else, like, how would a robot put in the stepper motor? They're tiny, and they're highly magnetic, and the pinions on them are just about the thinnest that I see. They're very, very small. I have no idea how a robot would be able to do that, but you know, that's not my job to figure out robots. That was a nice watch, though. The case especially was great. Okay, moving on. Mike D. Spencer, I have a question for your next mail call. What is your opinion, take on Squail watches, if any? Oh, sorry, I was looking at an old couple walking down our street. I first became aware of Squail watches, oh man, 6-7 years ago when they started coming out with their reissues, which I didn't know were reissues. I guess Squail was one of those old companies that got bought and zombified. Like, I think it was brought back from the dead. Like, if you look and search, you can find original Squail models. They don't show up very often. First time I ever saw one, this was really back in the day, somebody had a Squail, a modern one, and they use an ETA 2824 or similar movement. And those movements are very, very twitchy to pull the stem from. It's the only, in my mind, the only real sort of drawback to them, because the keyless works are kind of like an H558, and then it's all these over-levered, lightly made, stamped metal parts that sort of nest on top and around and underneath each other, and then are sort of lightly screwed together. So if you, coming from underneath, if you push that stem release lever even slightly too deeply, the keyless works, everything comes out of alignment. And then the only way to correct that, there's no way to do it from the back, period. You can't do it. And once it's out of place, you're done. So you have to pull the movement, pull the hands, pull the dial, pull the calendar movement, strip it all the way down to so just the front plate of the movement showing, and then you can do the keyless works. And it's like, that was tough, and that was not a great first introduction to Squail, even though it wasn't Squail's fault. For reference, by the way, on those kind of ETA movements, the way you prevent that misalignment from happening is you don't use a sharp poker, because then you can poke down as far as you like. The stem release on one of those ETAs is actually, you've got the stem release, but then it actually has a slot built on either side. And you use a screwdriver, and like a jeweler's screwdriver, and that drops in just enough to release it, and then off you go. That's the way you do it. I like the look of them, blues and, bright oranges and things like that. It's been a long time since I've held one, so I don't know. I can't really say. I thought they were neat, but then I kind of forgot about them. But I like old watches, not really so much new ones. Jeff Talley. Oh, this is a comment about an answer I gave to another question about my MGB GT, talking about British Electrics, and people were like, sorry, I'm looking at a notification on my phone. Got it. Okay, cool. About how, British Electric problems, but the issue with the British wiring harnesses isn't their design or their execution so much as it is their need for maintenance. And you wouldn't ever think you would need to maintain an electrical wiring harness, but you kind of do, because they have metal snap plugs like this, and you have to use, it's not a super firm thing, and you have to use dielectric grease that conducts electricity that will keep out dirt and water and crap while also allowing for the electricity to flow. And if you don't do that every whatever the heck it is, then you start getting shorts and it doesn't work out. But anyway, Jeff Talley, Yes, sir, I remember the dielectric grease. My dad's MGB GT was a 73 with a black interior. Hey, the one I drove all over creation was a 73 with a black interior. What was the outside color? That's what I want to know. Anyway, Dad's had true wire wheels with knockoffs. It was a beautiful car. He always wanted the MGC. There was an MGC GT? I didn't know that. You have the MGB. It's a straight four banger. It's like a glorified tractor engine. This was during the sort of the muscle car era, running into that, and they were trying to sort of catch up, and so they redesigned the MGB to the C, which was with a straight six, and they had to do a bunch of stuff, like they had to bulge the hood because of the size of it. However, unfortunately, I gathered that the engine design was not great. It added a lot of weight, but not a whole lot of power, and they did not sell very well at all, and they are not really considered collector's items these days. Apparently the aftermarket thing to do, this is the thing, and I've considered it. If I had $1 billion or a magic wand, the British Leyland Rover designed that could be wrong on that, but they designed an aluminum V8, aluminum heads and everything else like that, that drops right into the engine bay. And I think it bolts right onto the existing. It bolts right onto the existing transmission too, and it doesn't require a hood bulge. It also doesn't require anything like having to completely rework the front suspension to deal with the extra added weight of the engine, because the aluminum V8 weighs the same or maybe even slightly less than the original four-banger. I guess there's some other stuff. It's not quite that easy to drop in. I wish it were, but anyway, that's what I've considered. If I could wave a magic wand, that would be cool. But I'm not a speed demon anymore, so why would I want to do that? Tom N. Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome. Wrong YouTube channel. Who says hello and welcome? Kidding aside, I really appreciate your shop talk segments. The 1100, 2200, 2700 movements are exquisite. You mentioned a dual movement watch. Are you referring to a dual face watch a la Reverso Duo Face JLC, Jaeger-LeCoultre? If so, that would be awesome. I don't know. The only reason I was thinking about two, is it over here? I was thinking about something that had two. Where is it? Did I put it upstairs? Is it over here? I've been trading with a gentleman who has been getting rid of a lot of like this and that and stuff and buying things off of him. One of the things he sent me was a really cool JDM Alba, a quartz watch, in this weird 12-hour timer format. So it looks like a wristwatch, and it's got a main register, and then it has a 12-hour watch face off to the side, which is a separate movement, even though both movements use the same circuit. I can't find a whole lot about it, but it's very cool, and so I've sort of been thinking about it. Mechanically, I mean, quartz, you can dial those in and they'll be pretty tight. Plus, in that watch, the second smaller 12-hour thing doesn't have a seconds hand, so you're not really going to see it coming in and out of alignment with timekeeping with the other one. But also, it's not meant for timekeeping. It's meant for recording elapsed time. With two mechanical movements, that would be tough, unless you could somehow maybe power them from the same mainspring somehow into a power sharing thing to try to keep the power supply similar, or has some kind of a governor. I don't know. I can't figure it out. Pretty cool. He continues. Would not the principle of building a heavier balance wheel for stability carry through on any movements? What are the downsides? Greater gear chain wear, downsides of a heavier balance is that it has to be counteracted by a stronger hairspring. Because the hairspring has to take up all that force and all the momentum and then reverse it and do it over and over and over again. So everything is a trade-off. There's a reason we don't see very many heavily built balances. I suspect in the case of that watch with the heavy balance, there was a need to have that kind of momentum preserved, perhaps, in order to keep something steady going. Like it, that helped maybe the gear train running at a certain speed. Instead of having to push the balances hard, the watch could rely on the inertia, or whatever you want to call it, in the balance. Again, just a guess. Last thing from Tom N. My efforts are really appreciated. Well, thank you. P.S. You could likely write off the cost of an outbuilding shop for the business as a business expense. Yeah, well, I probably could. I don't see why I couldn't. If it's a purpose-built building, I don't see why not. The only thing that sucks, though, is that then you don't get the deduction on part of the house. So I'm not a taxologist. I don't know which one would be smarter. Oh, man. Saul Brook. Saul asked me a question that I can't answer. Could you quartzify a 7S26002 blank watch with an 8F35 movement? Looking at the SLR001, SLR003 quartz monsters for inspiration, but they kind of look like they have a crown, a true crown at 4, so I have no idea. I have no idea. I own an 8F. Wait, do I? No, I own a bunch of 8Ms. Do I still own that Grand Seiko? That quartz one? Gosh, I can't remember. It's ridiculous. Everything depends on whether the alignments work out. If you don't have to create a custom movement holder or do some kind of hybridized crown stem thing. If you had, I don't know. I don't know. You'd have to. It's the crown at 345 versus the crown at 4 versus the crown at 3. It just messes up a whole bunch of different stuff because you've got to get those alignments right. But it's just honestly, Saul, I'm gonna have to apologize and say I have no idea. Blonde Strats more fun. Oh, this is talking about the H558, the C clips that keep the buttons inside the case. They're tiny. Spencer, you make removing those C clips look too easy. The H556 you restored for me in 2019 continues to keep amazing time, 1 to 2 seconds a week. Thanks. That's great to hear. I've lost uncounted numbers of those tiny screws, and I got to the point that I can have relatively consistent output with them when I get them off. The biggest thing is that they tend to have spring power and they're going to go kapoink. So you need to, what would actually probably work better than what I have been doing, which is putting my finger in there and then kind of using it to go clunk. Probably what would be smarter of me is to get a little ball of Rotoco, and when I'm looking at the clip, put the ball of Rotoco underneath the clip. So the clip would be facing up like this, ball of Rotoco underneath it, and then there's no place for it to go at all. That's probably a much better system than what I'm using now, which is not a system at all. I'm relying on muscle memory. Super Cruise. Hi Spencer, thanks for your videos. Very entertaining for us watch idiot savants. Do people still say that? I thought that was just an old guy thing. I got a real chuckle out of your comment about your workspace and not knowing where things are. I can relate. Okay, I suspect a lot of people can. Questions for next mail call. I also restore vintage Seiko. What are your thoughts on the Seiko 2205 divers and these lady movements, high beat marvels? The Seiko 2205 divers are quite small. It seems like everyone I work on has a jacked up balance and hairspring, and I end up replacing the balance to get them to run well. Is this something you encounter when working on this caliber movement? No, I've never seen that actually. Those really tiny ladies movements, I tend to find their problems are usually related to because they're so tightly built. They have a number of parts that do double duty. Like they have a barrel and train bridge, and even though which is also the winding bridge, I think, but their tolerances are really tight. I have found most of the time the problem I have with them is the pallet fork being over lubricated. Because they're in fact, if I remember correctly, it might be that the 2200 series you don't even lubricate the pallet stones. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know why I'm thinking that. I'll have to research. But anyway, the biggest thing with them is that they're very lightly built, very tightly built. But I've never seen one with a bad balance / hairspring that I can remember. I don't know. I'll have to look at my notes. Let's see. Second question. When servicing a modern Marine Master 300 diver, where does one go to obtain the correct seals? Can these be ordered direct from Seiko or one of the other watch parts houses, or can you recommend another source? The deal with the Marine Masters, as far as I understand, is Seiko wants to service those personally. So they have to go to Japan, I believe. And they don't really sell parts or gaskets for them. As in the past, that the crystal screw down gasket is made of Viton, which doesn't really degrade. The crown seal on those is exactly the same as this 7S, an SKX, or one of the more modern, any one of those modern slim case divers, all the way back to the 7002s, same gasket. You just put it on and there you go, single big fat gasket right on the stem there. This is going to be interesting. Let's see. Finally, what are your thoughts on the existence of transitional pieces released from Seiko, such as early 1970s 6105 8000 slim case divers with the proof case back and the resist dial? Some question their existence, saying these must be service replacement dials. Thanks, John S. Or thoughts, John S. A lot of what Seiko does, they don't publish what they do. A vast amount of the knowledge that we have now about Seiko that we can state with any certainty comes from servicing guides, but mostly old advertising. And that's useful because you have all these old ads and they show watches and you're like, okay, cool. And they'll show it. The problem is that it appears that Seiko did not make ads for every possible variant. And there were variants not just for, in terms of the models themselves, but there were variants that were produced seemingly for sale only in one or two areas of the world. They've done this a few times, but for example, the Seiko 6139 6007, just a couple of minutes early. Everything we know about them is from observation. There's no advertising that I'm aware of that specifically lays out what they are. Everything I was able to find out about them online literally was just from observation. People were able to say, this is what we've seen, this is the date range. Examples that are seemingly unrestored always share these traits, which I thought was interesting. With that specific model, 6139 6007, it appears that it was sort of a transitional dumping ground for old A movements, and some other stuff, but they were putting A movements and B movements under the same dial in a standard case, but with, I believe, B-type deeper case backs. That's actually something I've been wanting to know. Is there a difference? Are there earlier 6139? Is there a variation basically? Does a 6139 6007 with an A movement have the shallower A style case back? Or do all of them, regardless of the movement type, have the deeper B type? Because the B movements are thicker than the A's. So that would be the next question. On the 6105s, it's going to be the same thing. Anecdotal evidence. The problem that I worry about, okay, let's assume for a second that they're real. This actually happened. As with the 6139 6007s, maybe it was a transitional dumping ground for getting rid of the old case backs or doing something. I guarantee you over the last 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of those watches, if they were a real catch-all variant, people said, oh damn, this thing is a mismatch. I remember they used to come up all the time, oh yeah, it's a mismatch. They would have been corrected, which means a lot of those watches don't exist anymore because they would have been swapped out. I wish we know more about it. I don't really have an opinion about it. I would just say I'm curious about the documentation, and I would want to know more and be able to see it. For me personally, what's cracking? For me personally, I guess it's not something I really thought about. I have it stuck in my head that they are an aftermarket mix and match. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying that's what's in my head. And I tend to, I don't know, unless I know more, I hadn't really thought too much about it. I don't know, my great triumph was that I was the one who identified the 6139 6009 notch resist, the American only variant of the blue 6139 6000 international model. So I was super proud about that, and I championed them for a long time as being real, but nobody believed me because you couldn't find, any advertising. Then I did. I found the ad that showed the 6139 6005, and that is that ad I was talking about earlier, the Automation Age watch, and it has it's a repeating line of 4 different models of watches, just a ton of them like on an assembly line. That's what it looks like, but it's a line of watches. Second one down is that 6139. Once I found that, we were all set. But thankfully the pictures were really big, and I was able to blow them up and confirm what it was. So you would need, I don't know how you do that though, because what ad is going to show the dial with a resist and the case back with a proof, because they don't show the case back? I don't know, man. You just got to keep getting that documentation and see if it's in a very specific window. If you have the observed production history of the pieces that are known, and you can see how tight that window is, because like the 6139 6007s were seemingly only produced for about 3 months. So maybe it's the same thing with those transitions. I'd be curious to find out. Let's see. Citizen 9. Nothing like a jazz bass. I do love jazz basses. I can see my future settling down with my watch collection and putting that money into one sweet old bass. For now, my Squire jazz bass, while far from being perfect, has the ultimate benefit of being there. No, that's true, and that is true. And it's hard, to buy this stuff and hope for the best. I really wish I could go to a huge used music store. I wish one existed that was the size of a Home Depot, and I could just go in there and go through all the things, because there's so many different models that I'd love to get my hands on, like the first run 62 reissues that were made in Japan apparently can be great. They can also be terrible. but you don't know until you get there and actually physically hold one and play it. An old jazz bass, same thing. I had a almost mint 73 jazz bass in natural with the black rectangular inlays in the neck and the white binding. And it was a beautiful, beautiful bass, but it was kind of a piece of firewood. The original owner had never played it, really. When I got it from him in the 80s, it was almost brand new. And there was something about the bass, it was just kind of funky. And the sound wasn't great, the electronics weren't great, and so I ended up actually never playing it. It lived under my bed through a whole bunch of moves, and a bunch of different states, and I just never played it. It just didn't get played, and eventually I sold it. And the person I sold it to didn't do anything with it, and they sold it to a dude who was the bass player for some band in Los Angeles, and I sold it in mine in the late 90s. He went to sell it in like 2015, 2016, and someone watching these videos, I talked about it, someone found it. And I messaged the guy, but he didn't play it either. He said, and he was like, it looks like it's never been played. He didn't know its history, but his description of that bass sounded just like mine. And it just lived under his bed in its case. So, those CBS 70s stuff, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. So, and I've heard great things about modern Seiko, modern Fender. Some of the pieces you can get are great. It just depends. Unfortunately, I have to just limp along with what I've got, which is a Rickenbacker 4001 in black and white with a beautifully, beautifully inlaid neck. It's nice. Okay. Camelthorn. I just bought a new old stock really, 78387070. That's really cool. Those are the ones that were, there was a small number of those that were issued to the South African Air Force. They're not that easy to find. But so back to him. You had a 78287049. That's what you had when you were in the South African Air Force. That is really cool. And you said, I believe, that you lost it. How long ago did that happen? But that is really cool. But it's great that you found a new old stock one. Man, I'm amazed that stuff is still findable. JC. Oh, I pulled a watch apart, and all of the button and crown gaskets were just hard as rock because they were so aged and degraded. And so they snip them and they go crack. They're not even rubber anymore. But they were covered in lubricant. Someone was trying to get the old seals to behave. It's hard to do. So annoying when watchmakers just lube up those old seals and don't replace them. Lazy, lazy, lazy. It's true. You want to know what's lazier? Is a solution that is not only lazy, but it takes work. It takes probably as much work as replacing the gasket itself. I would get in watches because the buttons will stick because the seals are so hard, they'll stick in the tube. And so I haven't seen this for a long time. What somebody would do is they would pull the buttons and then they would shave off the outside of the hardened gasket to give it enough clearance so that the buttons would go in and out. That's the worst of the worst. See that a lot from really abused watches. Jeff Talley. Hello, Spencer. Thanks for the video. I've heard you say several times about repairing the old home of the barrel mainspring arbor in the main plate. Is there a chance of seeing you do this? If not, could you recommend a place where we can see it being done? Thanks in advance. Well, it's really tough because when I'm doing that machining, I'm using a staking press, but specifically for that, I'm using a Zeitz reamer. And they are, in order to get that machined out, you have to use a succession of increasingly large reamer bits to get it up. And when I'm doing it, I'm right on top of it. Like I'm looking at it like this. I just don't have a camera or a way for anybody to see. I don't know. It'd be nice to show them. Absolutely. Someday, unless someone has a suggestion, if I can get a camera that goes on glasses or my visor, I would certainly consider it. Okay, last question. MG. Hi, I'm from the Philippines. I have a 7548. Can you do relooming? Well, yes, I do relooming, but not on a flat dial. The thing with the flat dials, like a 7548 or 6309 or 6306, where the dial is literally flat, there's no raised marker, it's just the loom is printed. I've never been able to really make a satisfactory job of relooming those. Seiko printed them. If you look really closely at the loom, you should see that it has kind of this linen crosshatch pattern. That is because the printing heads have an area that they cover with a whole bunch of little points. And so it goes, and you can still see that pattern. I don't know of any way to replicate that. Every time I've tried to reloom a flat dial, it has looked awful. It's just, basically I don't do those anymore because I've never been able to get a good result. If one could make up a jig that has basically, if you can recreate the printing head that Seiko used to do that, you'd get closer to it, but no, not at this time. The best that I could say with those for restoring the loom is that I have the ability to whiten loom, to clean it up. But if your loom is still white and it just doesn't glow anymore, leave it alone. Original loom is unbeatable. It's irreplaceable, unreplaceable. And so if you've got white loom, yes. If it's blackened, that's when we get into chemical remediation, where we try to make it clean and white while not actually removing the original loom. I've tried doing other stuff, like there's a lot of other stuff I've tried, just never been successful. Anyway, what a strange week. It's been a busy week, man. I tell you, this watch, this gentleman's watch, servicing this thing was like going back in time. I saw problems with this watch I've never seen before. I mean, the previous watchsmith, like, it was busy. There were just a lot of crazy problems inside this watch. Really, really, really crazy. It took a lot of work to get this done. I'm proud of it, but I'm still kind of like... Anyway, folks, that's it. This was sort of disjointed and odd. I hope it contained useful information, and as my dad used to say, just keep pedaling. All right. Bye, folks.
Okay, I have one addendum. Going through last couple of months, Sabrina's really been helping me organize everything, as she went through and organized all of my dials. And in doing so, she found a bunch of dials that I had that were junk. I mean, literal junk. Anyone else would have thrown them away. But I was like, it's a good opportunity for me to practice. Let me see if I can bring them back. This was the worst of them. This dial surface was like just rusty as hell. And so what I wanted to do is see if I could bring it back in any way. So what I did was I did what I do when it's this, is I pull off all the markers and the date window and the applied logo, and then I clean it as carefully as I can, and then I clear coat it, which is what I did here. And so I'm probably going to flatten this down and maybe do one more clear coat to give it some real depth. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's good looking? You think that's kind of weird? Hang on. I don't have a spare case sitting around, but we're going to go like this. I don't know. What do you think? Can you imagine that on a watch? Would that look good? I think it would, but I don't know. So I wanted to gauge reactions on that. I just didn't know I had that many. I never throw anything away, so it's a shock to come and find these things and see if I can bring them back. Here's another one. I'm doing the same thing too. This one had really, really major water damage, but for some reason it wasn't faded, which is odd, but you can see all the bubbling on the surface. And I have all the markers and everything. Put those back on. Here's yet another one. This one I considered literal garbage. And he was actually at the bottom of a box labeled old parts. I'm sorry, labeled bad parts. Then I got it out, and again, I cleaned it up, and I clear coated it. It's after pulling everything, it faded, but it's, I still think it looks pretty decent, all things considered. But I need to smooth out the finish, though. It's kind of pebbly. I'm not quite sure how to do that, but I'll figure it out. The last one, I haven't decided what to do with this one yet. I haven't stripped anything off of this one yet. The actual dial surface itself is not bad. Reloomed and with cleaned up metal, it probably would look pretty decent. It's just interesting. It's got a good color. A lot of the damage around the chapter ring would probably be hidden. It's still peppery. The surface is peppery, but it's not bad looking. It's just wild, though, because I'm dealing with these parts that even I considered useless, and now obviously I'm starting to bring them back. Here's another one. I remember when I got this in, and this dial surface, it's almost perfect. I mean, that's original loom, but it has that patina mark right under the Seiko. I remember somebody in the old forum saying that, basically the dial was worthless as a result. And back in those days, he was probably right. These days, everything changes. So, in any case, you guys let me know what you think about those dials and whether or not that would be interesting. Okay.